When looking at the concept of chins in MMA, I think the way we define a good chin is kind of different from how we define having a bad chin. And that sounds kind of stupid, so let me explain. Someone has a good chin, they are able to take shots consistently that either would rock or drop or knock out other fighters, but they just don't seem to have that much of effect on these fighters. Take, for example, Marvin Vettori, Cheeto Vera, Max Holloway, guys that get hit clean and get hit often, and sometimes both, and they just walk right through them. They don't seem to have much of an effect on him. And I think probably the best example, in my opinion, is Marvin Vettori. Unfortunately, due to his defensive deficiencies, he leaves himself open to getting hit very often and getting hit very clean, but he just seems to have an otherworldly ability to just walk right through shots and not seem that fazed by him. And I think we do a pretty decent job, of defining good chins. I mean, it's pretty easy to define someone who has a good chin. You can see that they got tanked, they got, hit with what's supposed to be a chinner, or at the very least would drop most fighters or rock most fighters, but they just eat it and they keep moving forward, right? But I think we define someone who has a bad chin, which is the opposite, someone who takes shots, and whereas normal fighters might not be too terribly fazed by them, these fighters seem to do the chicken dance with every single thing they are hit with, and it's just embarrassing. But I also think we use the term no chin, chinny, chin's gone, whatever. I think we use those terms way too flippantly. And in my opinion, it's to the point where I think a lot of fighters that we define as not having a chin, we don't have sufficient enough evidence for. And the thumbnail's not clickbait either. I genuinely think that we don't have sufficient enough evidence to definitively say that Chuck Liddell, Cody Garbrandt, and Alistair Overeem especially don't have chins. I think the reason they got finished so many times in their fights has nothing to do with whether they had a good chin or whether or not they're just chinny or they've lost their chin or they're washed or whatever. I don't think it has anything to do with that. And in fact, is just due to other things, all right? So let's get into this one. Let's talk about Chuck Liddell, right? Most people know Chuck Liddell in terms of no chin, as, he got knocked out 3 times in a row, 4 times in his last 6 fights. We don't count the third Tito fight. No one counts the third Tito fight. Can we just forget that it exists? Great. Cool. UFC fights. We're on the same page now. So in his last 6 fights, he got knocked out 4 times in a row, lost 5 times, won one of those, and a bounce back after a loss after losing the title. But anyways, we're not here to talk about the specifics necessarily. We're here to talk about the knockout losses themselves. So 4 knockout losses, the first one being where he lost his title to Rampage Jackson. Then he lost by TKO to Shogun Rua. Then he lost by knockout to Rashad Evans. And then finally, in his UFC retirement fight, he lost by knockout to Rich Franklin. Wrong dude, Rich Franklin. So, you got knocked out 4 times in a row, 4 times in your last 6 fights, 3 of those being in a row to end off your career. You ended your career getting knocked out several times. That's not a good look. And I understand why people say, Chuck lost his chin. Chuck's got no chin anymore, right? But I think we have to go back and look at the definition of no chin, right? Someone who doesn't have a chin is someone who takes shots that most fighters would be able to take, right? Someone who's just chinny is someone who takes a shot. Maybe it's a grazing shot off like the cheek. It still wobbles you a little bit, but normal fighters might, take a step back, blink for a second, but then they're right back in the fight. But someone who's chinny, someone who doesn't have a chin, would take that shot and then do the chicken dance, and or someone who takes like kind of a bump shot on the head just gets dropped, right? Whereas another fighter who takes that shot, most other fighters who take that shot would kind of maybe get dropped, but then they'll be fine again. But this fighter just gets completely slumped over, right? And I think we fail to stick to that definition, and instead we just apply the definition to someone who gets knocked out a bunch, right? someone's been knocked out a bunch, therefore they must have no chin because most other fighters aren't getting knocked out this much. Therefore, it must be a problem with their chin, right? It was never a problem with Chuck's chin. It was a problem with his defense. Let's look at the shots he actually got hit with here. In the Rampage Jackson fight, he got hit with a huge bomb, right? You can't tell me that any other fighter would have just tanked the shot or would have been relatively fine with this shot, right? So that's not a result of no chin. Okay, let's look at his next knockout loss to Shogun Rua. He was taking some shots throughout this fight. They weren't the cleanest shots, but he was able to take them. He didn't do the chicken dance every time he got hit with something. He was able to take the shot, keep moving, keep throwing back with Shogun, and keep it, decently competitive-ish until he got flattened out, right? And then this fight, it was more of a TKO. And the reason for this was Shogun wasn't finding his range with that straight or overhand, whatever the heck he was throwing, right? He was kind of missing. He was kind of clipping Chuck with it, but he wasn't really finding the mark, right? And like I said, he was clipping Chuck with these shots, and Chuck wasn't doing the chicken dance every time he got hit with it. But once Shogun did find the mark, it landed clean on the chin, dropped Chuck to his butt, and follow-up shots TKO. Chuck wasn't completely out, but that's just how a TKO works, right? So that knockout was due to Shogun eventually being able to find the mark, whereas he wasn't able to before. He just needed time to find it, and it led to a second round, I believe, TKO. Then, in the Rashad Evans fight, this may have been the cleanest shot Chuck has ever been hit with in his life. That overhand that Rashad Evans landed on Chuck Liddell was a bomb, okay? And again, with this one, you cannot sit here and tell me that, a normal fighter, any other fighter, would have just been able to tank this shot. You can maybe make the argument for the Shogun fight that some really, really tough fighter would maybe be able to scramble and make it back to his feet like a Dan Henderson, right? Or if Shogun himself got hit with that shot, they could scramble and recover. But I don't think that would speak to Chuck's lack of chin as it would speak to that fighter's toughness, right? But in the Rashad Evans fight, no one's tanking that shot. No one's recovering from that shot. Everyone's getting knocked out by that shot. That was clean as clean gets. Moving on, Rich Franklin, kind of the same thing. Not really the same level of, head snappery that Rashad Evans landed on him, but they both got in a flurry. Chuck was chasing him against the fence. Rich landed a counter, clean on the chin, dropped and put him away, right? I don't really think you can tell me that most other fighters are going to be able to tank those shots. So we've seen that most of the shots that Chuck got hit with were legit power shots that would have put anyone else away. So what was the problem? And so the problem was Chuck's defense, all right? Chuck was kind of flat-footed and stationary a lot of the times. He had his hands kind of low, kind of out here a lot, right? He didn't move his head a lot. He wasn't very quick, right? He was a dangerous power puncher himself, but he just didn't have the best defense and didn't have the ability to slip and move and keep head movement and evade shots and make guys miss, right? It was a matter of him being able to land first against these guys, right? He couldn't really slip and make someone miss. He couldn't, shield block somebody, then again, he was just an older era fighter. They weren't as technically developed as guys nowadays. So I really wouldn't, crap on Chuck for that. But it's just the fact of the matter is he was very flat-footed and kind of low output sometimes just throughout his fights. And that led to him being very open to these quicker guys that can actually find the mark and put him away with it. All right, so moving on to our next example, let's look at Cody Garbrandt. Now, another prime example of a guy getting knocked out multiple times in a row, 3 times in a row initially when he lost the title, and then got knocked out again in his flyweight debut, in his only flyweight fight against Kai Kara-France. So, what was Cody's problem? Well, we all know that it was his defense. I think with the Chuck Liddell fight, with Chuck Liddell's career, his defense and his lack of footwork and his flat-footedness wasn't ever really discussed when we were talking about his lack of chin or his, why he lost. It was only, oh, Chuck lost his chin, right? Whereas Cody Garbrandt, I think we do recognize that more, and I think that's good, but we still do say, oh, he has no chin, right? So let's look at the shots he got knocked out with in the TJ Dillashaw fights. He got hit with clean, precise combos, right? I don't know really that I can confidently say that other fighters are just going to survive those combos from TJ Dillashaw. Maybe they would, I'm not sure, but I don't think we have sufficient enough evidence to say so. So I think he got hit precisely, right? It was his defense that was the factor in why he lost. He had not much head movement, which is really weird to say after the Dominic Cruz fight, because in the Dominic Cruz fight, Cody showed really solid head movement. He was making Dominic Cruz hit air. He wasn't letting Dominic land clean on him at all. He was constantly moving his head. So honestly, it's just weird. It just confuses me. It's like the guy that showed the head movement in that fight, it almost didn't translate over, right? He stayed very stationary. He kept his hands below his chin. He almost kept his chin out a lot too. He never really tucked his chin either, which left his chin on a silver platter to be hit. If he tucked it and left it behind his shoulder, maybe some of these shots would have grazed more. But no, he got caught clean on the chin so many times, twice by TJ Dillashaw and lots of combos, right? And in the Pedro Munoz fight, you may say, okay, who does Pedro Munoz knock out like that? And the answer is not really anybody else. But when you dip your head down and you start winging overhands with somebody else, it's a 50-50 shot as to who gets knocked out first, right? It's not a matter of skill or power or chin or whatever. It has a little bit to do with power, but like it doesn't have anything to do with like skill or who's the better fighter. If you and somebody else are just gonna have this kind of battle back and forth, it's a 50-50. It's a coin flip. Who lands that shot first? You're blindly winging overhands. They were both like trading overhands at the same time like this. It was about this fast. Boom, boom, boom. It was who lands it first. Cody landed a couple, right? Pedro landed a couple, like they were like smack shots on the cheek, but Pedro just happened to land the first chinner, right? That's just how it works, all right? Cody decided he wanted to coin flip, and he lost. He guessed heads and he got tails. That's just how it works. Moving on. Flyweight. You're at a bit of a risk at flyweight cutting more weight, right? And this kind of does have to get into a chinniness a bit more. When you cut weight, when you cut water weight, and I kind of think it's something that everybody's starting to like know now, you drain fluids from your body, right? Duh. Right? Everyone knows that. And you also drain fluids from your brain. So if you're cutting more weight into a lower weight class, your brain's not going to have a lot of cushioning to sit in and absorb some of the bouncing around that's going to do when you're getting hit, right? That's why TJ Dillashaw was knocked out so easily against Henry Cejudo, right? Then again, Henry Cejudo landed clean shots on TJ Dillashaw. They were clean shots, and Henry was accurate with it, and TJ couldn't recover, but also TJ wasn't probably able to recover as easily as maybe he would have if he was at 135, right? So in this case, maybe it is a bit of a chin thing for Cody Garbrandt, at least in the Kai Kara-France fight at flyweight, right? Less fluid in your brain to cushion that fall, but also Kai Kara-France hit him with very, very clean shots. Kai Kara-France didn't hit him with grazers. He didn't bounce a punch off his forehead and, Cody did the chicken dance. He got hit clean on the chin several times. And I don't think it's really a matter of chinniness in that specific case. Yes, his chin was a little degraded due to a higher weight cut, but in the end, it didn't matter as Kara-France, like I said, sound like a broken record, hit him clean, hit him often, hit him hard, put him away. Right? And now we're on to Alistair Overeem. Now this one's going to sound really stupid because it's like, dude, Alistair Overeem got KO'd 14 total times throughout his career. That's insane. That's a stupid amount of knockout losses. Surely there's a chin issue, right? I would say hardly at all, right? At the very end of his career, I believe it was his very last fight against Alexander Volkov. That was probably the least clean shot he got hit with. Maybe the Keith Jardine knockout loss wasn't as flush of a chinner, but maybe there's an argument to say that his chin wasn't the same in the Volkov fight as it was throughout his career. Maybe, but also, like I said, he was older. He wasn't on the sauce anymore. And also, he did get hit with a very clean shot through the guard, and Volkov's accurate with it, right? But let's look at some of his more famous knockout losses. Moving back, the Francis Ngannou knockout loss, that was a monster uppercut that he got hit with. You can't tell me anyone's surviving that. Moving on. The Stipe Miocic TKO loss, those were nasty ground and pound shots. Landed right on the chin, bouncing the back of his head off the canvas over and over and over again. You can't tell me that's a chin issue, okay? Who else is surviving that? No one. All right, let's go back even more. Let's look at the Travis Browne one. We're going to skip a couple. Travis Browne, yeah, he got hit with a very flush front kick to the face. Again, like Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson style, Chito Vera, Frankie Edgar style. We'll talk about Frankie Edgar in a bit too, right? He got front kicked in the chin, boink, bounced his head back, right? He got hit with that several other times too, but then he got hit with it flush, and then he listened to his defense too late, but we'll get to that in a minute. The Bigfoot Silva knockout loss, that was brutal. That Bigfoot Silva was hitting him with chinner after chinner after chinner. It was gnarly, right? So we're looking at a lot of these knockout losses. Alistair just got hit way too clean, way too often, right? That's not a chin issue. That's a defense issue. Alistair was a pretty dangerous offensive kickboxer, but he was pretty lackluster defensively, and that's weird considering that he's a K1 kickboxing champion, right? He has so much striking experience under his belt, yet he's just so terrible defensively. He tends to hunch forward a lot when he's walking at you, and he kind of just leaves his chin out. He has hardly any head movement. Dude does not move his head. He'll shell and block up sometimes, or he'll back up, but he just does not move his head, right? And then the Travis Browne fight specifically, he was leaning forward, hands down. He just was not taking Travis seriously at all. And I understand given the context of that fight, right? But he wasn't taking Travis seriously at all. Travis was stabbing him over and over again with teep kicks to the body, and Alistair just wasn't giving him any mind. And Travis is like, okay, this is working. Keep stabbing to the body. Boom, go to the head. And it landed exactly how Travis wanted it to land. Knocked Alistair clean out, right? So Alistair was being kind of stupid in that fight, right? So again, we see that a fighter is getting hit clean with, power shot after power shot and knockout loss after knockout loss. There's not really sufficient enough evidence in that to say that he had no chin, or he lost his chin, or he got knocked out, or he lost so many times because he had no chin. That's not the reason why he lost all the time. Why he lost all the time was because his defense was bad, and he just leaned forward and just left his chin on a silver platter and didn't ever move his head, right? Maybe if he moved his head a little bit, he would do a little bit better, but whatever, right? And then we go to Frankie Edgar, the aforementioned Frankie Edgar. I feel like that would be a decent segue. So, 3 brutal knockout losses at the tail end of his career. 4, if you count the one at the very end of his featherweight run. So he had never been knocked out before up until the Brian Ortega fight. Been considered as someone who has a good chin. And then he had all those knockouts and it was like, oh, Frankie lost his chin, man. Okay. Ortega hit him with a very, very clean uppercut. I don't know if that's really an instance of him losing his chin. And then the knockouts after that, it's like, who's surviving those, right? It's like, he beat Pedro Munoz to get in the the bantamweight rankings. Pedro arguably won that fight, but that's either here nor there. Sandhagen flying knee. You telling me someone else is surviving that flying knee? Really? Right? And then the Cheeto front kick knockout. Again, are you telling me that anyone else is surviving that? And then the Chris Gutierrez fight, once again, are you going to sit here and tell me that any other fighter would have survived that step in, that knee counter? It wasn't a step in knee, it was a counter from a level change. But are you going to tell me that anyone else is surviving that? No, it's not. So if no one else is surviving that, it's not a chin issue. It's a tendency issue from Frankie Edgar, right? Frankie is constant pressure. Constant pressure. He's always walking you down, pressing you against the fence, feinting level changes, trying to shoot takedowns, trying to give you all these different weapons. And he's very skilled in that. He was a very good fighter throughout his entire career. He had a really good longevity. Arguably, it's arguable that like his featherweight resume may have been slightly better than his lightweight resume. Then he beat like BJ Penn twice, I think. He beat BJ Penn right at lightweight. He was lightweight champion, right? 3 title defenses, I believe. Then again, you know, like his featherweight resume, he beat some like legit relevant fighters at flyweight, like not flyweight, featherweight, even modernly relevant fighters like Yair Rodriguez. So anyways, but that tangent aside, Frankie Edgar, very constant forward pressure, very skilled, giving you all these different looks, but he's so open to those knees and those uppercuts. He's always dipping his head, level changing like that. And that constant pressure, that's why Sandhagen caught him with that knee. He drew him into the pressure and the level change. Boom, hit him with that knee. Same thing with Chris Gutierrez. Gutierrez counter-kneed him off of the level change. Just boink, that's all he had to do, right? So, unfortunately, it's not a chin issue for Frankie Edgar either. It's a tendency issue. It's reading the fighter's tendencies, reading what they do in that fight and just in their past fights as well, and being able to counter. And it was a matter of the fighters that beat him just being able to do it better than he did. They were just either more skilled than he was, or just were able to read him better and just capitalize off something, put him away, right? So that's not a chin issue there. I would understand maybe if you wanted to say Johnny Walker is someone who doesn't have that great of a chin, but maybe some tougher fighters would be able to survive some of the knockouts that he got. Maybe if you want to tell me like the Jamal Hill fight, the Jamal Hill knockout loss, like that was a grazer, and I get it. There can be some grazer shots that like do genuinely wobble your brain the right way, like the wrong kind of way, I guess, in a way that just puts you out, and it's not a good look. But yeah, that's a sketchy one, right? It just grazes off the cheek or the forehead. I can't remember. And then it flops down, right? The Ankalaev loss was kind of just like weird. I'd say not Volkov, Uzdemir. I'd say Uzdemir hit him with a decently clean counter shot, but he was kind of just wobbling him all over the place. You know, I would understand. I'd say he gets hit with decently clean shots a good amount of the time, but I would understand if you want to say that Johnny Walker doesn't have as strong of a chin as his peers. One I do want to talk about, and I'm going to end this video on, is Alexander Volkanovski. This one kind of makes me a lot more upset than the other ones. The other ones are just like, I totally understand why you say they don't have a chin. They get knocked out so many times in a row. They get knocked out consistently, and they're known for just getting knocked out, right? Chuck is unfortunately like known for at the end of his career just getting knocked out. Cody Garbrandt is known for just getting knocked out all the time, right? So I understand that. But when someone says that Alexander Volkanovski is a chinny fighter, and so many people say this, right? So many like YouTubers like say this just flippantly, like it's just a fact, right? Yeah, Volk's a little chinny, you know. No, he's not. He's not chinny, right? And I get it. He got knocked out twice in a row, right? The Islam Makhachev head kick knockout loss, that was a clean head kick, right? Hit him right across the dome. Then again, it's a head kick. Head kicks and knees and elbows are going to have so much more like devastating power than punches. And especially like knees and kicks are going to have a lot more devastating power than punches and elbows. You can generate so much more torque. It's a heavier limb to throw at somebody, and especially because you don't have, gloves with like kicks and knees and elbows, you can really lay into somebody and get a sharp limb to throw at their face, right? So that was a legit knockout. I don't know that you can really, again, tell me that someone else would have just tanked that shot, tanked that head kick. And then the Ilia Topuria loss. So many people. I think it's starting to become less of a problem now, but especially like right when that happened, people are like, oh, if Volk didn't take the Islam Makhachev rematch, then this wouldn't have happened. Then Topuria wouldn't have knocked out Volk. What are you talking about? Like, look at the knockout itself, right? Alexander Volkanovski gets hit with a shot by Ilia Topuria. Topuria, he backs up against the fence, and he is covering up, right? He backs up against the fence, he's shut up, he has his hands to his head. And Topuria follows him, and he's like right in range with him. Topuria is ready to throw his next shot. He is right in front of Volk, right? So if you're in Volk's position, you're backed up against the fence, you're covering up, and you have the most devastating knockout puncher the featherweight division has ever seen, arguably. If you want to argue Conor, I understand, but for the sake of the video, right? The most devastating knockout boxer the featherweight division has ever seen right in front of you, ready to throw his next shot. What does Volkanovski do? Is that, all right? He goes from shelled up to opening up to throw a shot right back at Ilia because he wants his get back, right? And I get it. Ilia tagged him with a shot. He backs up against the fence. Volk wants to hit him back. I get it. But when you're in front of the most dangerous knockout boxer you've ever seen, you've ever fought, why are you doing that? And then Topuria throws that monster overhand and it connects just so clean on the chin. That was a chinner to end all chinners, all right? Go and look at that shot and tell me. Come back and tell me that Prime Volk eats that shot. Or that any other fighter eats that shot. Dude knocked out Max Holloway. Okay? Dude, oh, man. Ilia Topuria has a different amount of power. He has stupid power. When you pair that with that punch, seriously landed clean on the tip of the chin, snapped his head around so hard, knocked him clean out. How are you going to sit here and tell me that, if Volkanovski just didn't take a short turnaround after the Makhachev rematch, or just didn't take the Makhachev rematch at all, then Ilia wouldn't have knocked him out. Volk fought Volk's fight in that fight. He was doing good. He was fighting how he normally fought. He was using, stance switching, feints, kicks, and, jab, sliding out of range, right? That's just how he fought how he fought. He didn't look slower. He didn't look tired, right? He looked like Volk in that Ilia fight. But what happened? Ilia, boink, hit him on the chin, put him away, right? And it's Volk's got no chin now. You don't have any good evidence to say that. And then in the Diego Lopez fight, he tanks all of Diego Lopez's shots. So does Volk have a chin again? Or does he still have no chin? Because to say either of those things, I think is stupid and is not supported by any sort of good evidence, right? If you want to say that, Volk's got a good chin now, then it's you were just saying he has no chin. You don't just get your chin back after you lose it. That's not how that works, right? You're just saying things that, sound good with the moment, and you're just reacting, but you're just going off knee-jerk reaction based on the most recent fight that happened. And you don't have an ability to analyze fights. If you want to say the opposite, if Volk still has no chin, then again, you still don't have an ability to analyze fights, because if you still say that, then did you not watch the Diego Lopez fight? Did you not watch him get dropped by a good shot from Diego Lopez and recover very well? He recovered very well, threw a couple shots back at him, split off and was ready to keep fighting, and then, and then the bell rang, right? Volk was fine, right? He recovered very well. And then in the other, other bits of the fight, he was trading shots back and forth with Diego Lopez, and he was tanking all of Diego's shots, right? Diego is really scary knockout artist. Like he knocked out guy in the when he was unranked. I can't remember his name. Submitted another guy. Knocked out Sadiq Yusuf. He went and and then he went and just rocked Brian Ortega all over the place, right? And then like he's obviously a very good striker. And then after that fight, he went and knocked out Gene Silva. You're gonna tell me that either Diego has no power or Volk still has no chin, or like Volk has it. Like either way you put it, I don't think there's any good evidence to suggest that Volk either has no chin or had no chin in the first place, because he obviously does. He obviously has a good chin. Does he have, as good of a chin as, Marvin Vettori? No. And there is a spectrum of chins. I'm not saying that it's not possible for a fighter to not have a chin or to be a chinny fighter. I just said that it's probably possible that like Johnny Walker has no chin. I think there's some good evidence to suggest that. He doesn't always get hit with the cleanest of shots, and he kind of just does the chicken dance all the time. So yeah, Johnny Walker probably has a pretty weak chin compared to everybody else. And there is a spectrum of it, right? Volkanovski has a chin, but he doesn't have the strongest chin in the game, right? But with all that being said, I think that just goes to show that the way we go about looking at, fighters who have no chin or fighters who have lost their chin, I don't think we have a good way of looking at it. And I think we need to actually look at the tendencies of fighters and why they're getting knocked out so much. It's not always as simple of an answer as they have no chin, right? It's usually a defensive deficiency that their opponents are taking advantage of. Or we need to look at fights individually and look at the shots that these fighters are getting knocked out with and say, do I think that another fighter could tank this shot and keep moving forward, or at least have a chance of recovering? And if you say that I think there are other fighters who could tank these shots, then yeah, that fighter probably doesn't have a good chin then. But if you can look at these knockout shots and say, yeah, those are bombs that are being landed on that fighter that knocked him out, I don't know that any other fighter would be able to just tank that. That I don't think we're looking at a chinny fighter. I think we're looking at either a very accurate and powerful striker that hit him clean on the chin with a shot, or a defensive deficiency, or both.